Hi, and thanks for joining us today for our monthly webinar. I am Nancy, and I'm joined by Kelsey today, who's a solutions consultant here with TCP Software. We are going to be going through our creating a schedule from A to Z feature. So everything you wanted to know about scheduling, or starting a schedule actually. As usual, before I get into the agenda here, we do record the webinar, and we will send that recording out to you either later today or tomorrow yet. So you'll have that coming towards you. So with the agenda today, we're going to be talking about creating a schedule, everything that has to do with it. So from adding a schedule versus cloning a schedule, the number of shifts that you can include, or you can have a 24-hour shift, the difference between the two of them. That we have minimum staffing requirements as an option in the schedules. Setting the work qualifications, which is a important part of once you create schedules and positions, you have to make sure to give the members in the member database permission to work them. And then options to add employee shifts, removing or updating positions, and then of course changing a schedule start time. So if for some reason you've got a schedule going on and you decide, oh, I need to change the start of that schedule, how to go about doing that. So a lot of stuff to cover. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Kelsey, who's going to take you through everything.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Nancy. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to be here with us. I'm going to take a moment here and we're going to switch presenters, and I'm going to pull up my screen for you. All righty. So for the purposes today, we're going to be kind of looking at several different areas throughout the system and how they ultimately impact that scheduling process. So we're going to kind of start in the back end about the technical, how do we actually build a schedule, create a schedule, modify a schedule, and then we're going to kind of move into the other areas for how we're going to kind of tie all of this together in the grand scheme of things. So Nancy will be manning the questions chat. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, she will be keeping an eye on that. So feel free to chime in and toss any questions in there. So for starters today, as we look at this scheduling A to Z process, as I mentioned, we're going to start out in that setup space. So I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with this. This is going to be where all of those rules and functional components of your Aladtec system live. And you're going to note right off the bat that you do have a positions tab in this space. So this is kind of an easy place to add a position, give it a name. Maybe we wanted to have, you know, a chief listed in here. You can give something a naming convention, and then you can go ahead and add that to this list for possible use on a schedule. So this is not the only way to do this. You are going to be able to actually create new positions directly from the scheduling screen itself, but sometimes it's a little quicker if you're going to do this in batch to do it from right here. In the schedules tab itself is where you're going to look at those foundational formations for your schedules. So as we're all familiar with in Aladtec, we create a foundation that we then plug people into. And you're going to have lots of different options in this space to help control how those schedules are going to look, how they're going to lay out, and then also, any rules or publishing items that might be associated with those as well. So if we were to take a look at some of the schedules that are out here in this test system, just our little disclaimer, this is a fake system with fake people, fake information. But as you can see here, we have some pre-populated schedules, and you will have the ability to expand these to view the details of these schedules. You're always going to have the ability to make edits in here and adjust things as things grow or change throughout the service. The other thing to note in this space is that you do see this little 3-dot ellipsis icon here. You do have the option to change the order that your schedules will display in your system. So as you start adding some new schedules, maybe you want to change the order of how they're displaying on your monthly calendar screen, for example. You're going to have the ability to click and move these just like you would throughout many places in the system, whether that's a field in the member database configurator or if you're used to using our forms building tool. you're going to be able to drag those and change the order of those items as well. So that's kind of a little neat tip that I think kind of goes under the radar sometimes. The other item to be aware of in this space is this additional option down here for daily staffing requirements. So this is the same functionality that you guys will see inside of each individual schedule, but instead of looking on a schedule by schedule basis, you can look across all of your schedules for the day. So perhaps you really don't have minimum staffing limits for one particular schedule. You want the system to look across 5 schedules and give you kind of that grand total for staffing. This is going to function exactly the same way. It's just going to look across all the schedules for the day. So you can do things like highlight certain days or highlight certain times and define what that minimum number of people should be. And as you go out and kind of build that picture throughout the day, you can get pretty broke down here, where you can say, you know what, Sunday, these hours, I need this many people. The rest of these hours, I need this many people. You can kind of do that across days and different ranges to really make sure that you're honing in exactly what the specific needs are across that whole day and all of your schedules. And just like you could see in the daily, or excuse me, the minimum staffing requirements on a schedule by schedule basis, you can add additional requirements to this. So if we're not only talking quantity of people, maybe let's say, for example, your minimum staffing for daily schedules across all schedules for the day is 20 people. But you wanted to take it a step further and say across my entire day of my 20 people, I need to have X number of people that have a certain license or certificate. Or maybe you need to have a certain number of staff members on duty who are of a specific gender. Any field that exists in your member database profiles, you can actually use as a reference point back here where you could say, of a particular license of my total number of people I need to have, X number of people that meet this additional requirement. So if we're talking, corrections, for example, it might be something like, of my 20 people a day, I need to have 5 females on staff. You're going to have the flexibility to make sure you have the right quantity of people, but also the right type of people as well. Looking at kind of the schedule build process, now that we've kind of looked at the main part of this page, you are going to have access to this add a schedule button. So if we come in here to create a whole new schedule, you're going to see kind of a blank starting point that you're going to be able to manipulate to meet your needs. So let's say for the example today, let's make an admin schedule. Maybe you have all of your crew on here, but you really want to have a place for your administrative staff to land. So you're going to be able to start out this process by giving it a name, whatever naming convention you would like to see on your actual schedule view. And then from here, we're going to create positions. And I always tell the customers that I work with to think about this in terms of maximums. So let's say, for example, you're a fire department and your typical staffing on, let's say this was the Engine 101 schedule, would be a captain, a driver, and 3 firefighters. So you're looking at 5 people on this schedule. But every once in a while, you throw on a 4th or a 5th firefighter. You're going to want to have real estate space for those people to land in for those occasions where you have some extra people on a schedule. They don't have to be in use all the time, but creating the place at the point of building the schedule gives you some real estate space to work with. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to click on this drop down and the system's going to show me all of the possible positions that I predefined in that positions tab we saw earlier. So if I wanted to start off with a spot for my chief to land and I needed to add another position and maybe I want to add my assistant chief, but that's not a predefined position that we've already built into the system. You're actually going to have the ability to use this other functionality to create a new position. And once you add that here, it's going to appear moving forward in that positions tab as well as in this dropdown. So maybe we add the chief, the assistant chief, and maybe maybe there's an admin assistant who you want on this schedule. You're going to be able to add all of those positions in to meet that maximum potential space you need to fill. Now from here, you're going to have some different options as far as how this schedule is going to function and how this schedule is going to lay out. And I'll show you kind of the implications of what this looks like. So for starters, you're going to have the ability to define what the start time of that schedule is. So you will see timeframes based on whatever interval time frame your system is currently set up in. Most commonly, it's going to be hour, 30-minute, 15-minute. If there is a circumstance where you're not seeing the interval that you need, you do have the option to contact Aladtec support to have your system interval changed. Let's say, for example, your system is defaulted at 30 minutes and you're going to start scheduling people in 15-minute increments. That is a change that support can make for you if needed. So if we were to go ahead and set this schedule, let's say, for example, the admin schedule starts running at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have some different format options from here, depending upon how you want to see this stuff lay out on the schedule. So by default, all schedules in Aladtec exist in a 24-hour time increment. You're going to have the ability to define what a typical schedule shift looks like. So when we see this whole space highlighted 8 to 8 in blue, we're essentially telling the system that we are going to use all of these 24 hours. But you have the ability to drag this. So let's say, for example, all of these folks work 8 to 5. We still have the remaining hours of this schedule, but the system's going to view this as a split. And this is going to now be what we call shift time versus non-shift time. And for my repeats and rotations users, that might be something that looks familiar to you and you've wondered about when adding block time in bulk. What does non-shift time mean? Well, it means that you defined what a typical shift looks like on this schedule, and non-shift time would cover anything that's not included in that time frame. You are going to have the ability to change the number of shifts as well. So probably not in this case would this be used, but let's say, for example, you're a 24-hour department and you use 12-hour shifts. You can actually split the system so that it will define that as 2 12-hour shifts for you based on your start time. We've even seen some, let's say, law enforcement agencies where maybe their day shift is a little bit shorter than their overnight shift. You're going to have the ability to drag that time around to match what that typical split looks like. We will be coming back to this. I do want you guys to see what this looks like once we actually make this change in another schedule. So for the experiment for this particular schedule, we're going to stay with that shift 8 to 5. And then from here, you're going to have some additional options. So we did kind of talk about that minimum staffing option. So as we can see, we've defined our shift time as that 8 to 1700. So the system's letting us pick 8 to 1700 for minimum staffing. And you can go through and you can set those guidelines just like you did on daily staffing. And you will, again, have the option to add ancillary requirements. So if we want to break this down schedule by schedule, you're going to be able to do that. And just like we mentioned before, you can point back to that member database and use those as additional criteria if needed. Now, some of the other options that exist back here, we kind of see them and you kind of go blind to them after a little while, but it's important to note what they're doing. So for example, every time you create a new schedule in Aladtec, it's going to default to the duration to always exist. And what that means is it's going to exist into the future indefinitely. You do have options here. So if you were to click on this, you're going to see a drop down that's going to allow you to give something an end date, for example. Maybe this schedule is no longer going to be in use after December 31st. You can actually set an end date for the schedule to be present in your system. So essentially, it'll help you archive that after a deadline. You can create temporary schedules. So let's say, for example, there is a county fair that you're going to be staffing for, and it's really only going to run over 2 weeks in the month of August. You can actually create a schedule that exists between certain dates. So it won't be visible until the start date is reached, and then it'll archive after your end date. So you can have something that populates for a brief period of time and then disappears again. And then there's also the option to allow things to start on a specific date. So this comes into play with, let's say, for example, in our EMS world, we added a second BLS truck, and that was going to start running and be a part of our schedule December 1st forward. We don't necessarily want to look at a blank schedule right now. So you could create the schedule ahead of time and set it to start existing as of the date that you intend to start using it. So it's basically like future dating a schedule to populate for you. The other option you're going to see out here is publishing. And publishing is kind of a tricky term. It means a lot of different things across multiple different platforms and products. But in the Aladtec space, what this means is visibility to the schedule, and that's from your staff perspective. So by default, all new schedules are going to have publishing disabled, which means they are going to be visible all of the time. Again, we have the option to click on this and change that publishing setting. So let's say, for example, you're a department that's in the habit of releasing schedules a month at a time. Maybe your staff is really used to seeing the new schedule come out for next month on the 20th of this month. You're going to actually have the ability to set up automatic schedule publishing, where you can publish the next month or couple of months as of a certain date and time, so that the system will automatically release the next chunk of schedule that should be visible to your staff on this automated pattern, so that you really don't have to think about it. You can also do this manually. So we all understand the reality that is working in public safety. Best of intentions, sometimes that scheduled release on the 15th of the month just isn't realistic. So maybe you have to work on those schedules a little more freeform, and you want a little more control over when those get released if you're going to use publishing. You're actually going to have the ability to use manual publishing as well. So let's say, for example, I finished up my December schedule today, and I'm finally now okay with that being visible to my staff. I can actually come through and say I'm going to manually publish through December of this year. And then that's going to force that schedule to be visible. It is important to note these are schedule by schedule settings, so you will have control over independent schedules and how they're going to publish. That's really helpful, especially in departments where we have multiple divisions or multiple departments within an actual entity working in the same system. For my folks that are law enforcement, and your dispatch might be in your system at the same time, you might want to have separate settings depending upon how those departments handle that. So you're going to have the flexibility to do that here. You're also going to have the ability to define if your staff is going to be able to sign up for partial shifts. So for example, let's say we had an 8 to 8 schedule, and we offer that out in 12-hour shifts, so 8 to 20, 20 to 8. Are we going to allow the staff to just take a 12-hour shift? Or are we going to give them the flexibility to pick the time frame they want within that 12-hour shift? So this functionality here is going to allow you to determine what your staff is going to have the option to do when it comes to signing up against this shift. So they will be able to either just simply click on a shift and take the whole thing if it's forbidden, or if you allow it, they'll actually get time frame date pickers that'll allow them to take a partial chunk of that shift. And then finally, we do have that status field down here. So any field that is active is an actively visible schedule. You do have the ability to archive these so that they're no longer visible and do not show in this screen. So once you do have an archived schedule, you will always have an option up towards the top of the screen here that'll say, do you want to see only active schedules, or do you want to see your archived ones too? So they're not gone and lost forever. You can hide them if you don't want to see them. And you can always reactivate them. So if there's something that gets archived and you decide you want to bring it forward again, Maybe it's that county fair schedule. You can actually reactivate that item. So if we were to go ahead and let's save our changes here so that we've got this admin schedule created. We now have the foundation for our 3 staff members to populate into the schedule. And I'm going to pull up another tab of Aladtec so we've got kind of an easy flip between the views. So on the schedule itself, if I were to narrow our scope down a little bit, and let's just look only at that admin schedule, you're going to note that that is now showing as an open schedule, and you're seeing duplicates. And this is something that tends to throw people. The thing to remember here is it always exists in 24 hours. So when we told the system that 8 to 1700 was the shift time, we still have to do something with the 17 to 08, the back half of that shift. So you will have the ability to utilize repeats and rotations to mass add what we call block time to close off the stuff that we don't want to see. This will ultimately allow you the flexibility to be able to extend someone's shift past 1700 or shift their time around on the day because you do have that 24 hours to work with. But we can close this off in a very easy way for you. And the way that you're going to do that is using that repeats and rotations function. So in repeats and rotations, we know that this is that pattern-based scheduling tool. Block time is handled mostly like a person inside of Aladtec. So if we scroll through our list of employees, we will see block time is the last option entered on that screen. So if we wanted to take this and block off the second half of that admin day that's not going to be utilized, we're going to pick the schedule we want to use. And this is where that non-shift time comes in. So remember, we set 8 to 1700 as our shift time, which means anything after 1700 to the end of that 24-hour window is non-shift time. You can do the same thing if you want to block all of the positions. Maybe you're creating a schedule that you don't need to see and you only want to open it up when you need it. You can block all schedules, all positions. And you'll be able to set a pattern to that too. So if there needs to be a layer of complexity, close this schedule every Monday from 17 to 08 or every Wednesday or every third Tuesday, whatever it might be. You're going to have the flexibility to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click non-shift time and I'm just going to set this to go 17 to 08 the next day. So we're just identifying that time that's not being used on this schedule. And you can even change the date range. So let's say, for example, we wanted to back this up to November 1st, so the whole month is nice and clean and you're not seeing fragments for the first week and a half. You can certainly do that. And you'll note as I change the date that my workday order changed here because this is going to mirror whatever you pick on the calendar. So you've got an easy transition there. And we're going to go ahead and let this run out that max of 2 years that the repeats and rotations tool currently allows. So once we run this rotation, it's going to think for a moment. We'll see the little pop-up at the bottom of the screen that says that was successfully added. And when I come back to this screen and refresh it, you're now going to see that that schedule is only displaying the 8 to 1700 now that we have blocked non-shift time. And if we were to go into the hourly editor and look at that schedule, that is visually what we were shooting for. If we need to ever make an adjustment, you can certainly make one-off changes and move that block time, or you can delete block time and make major adjustments if you need to. But this kind of brings us to the next part of this process is that we can see here, no matter what position I click on, I got this red banner down here. And it's telling me that there's no members available to work in this position on the admin schedule. And that is because people will not be visible here until we make qualification adjustments. So any new schedule, any new position, for the most part, we'll talk about when this doesn't apply, you're going to be making adjustments to people's work qualifications to make them eligible for this schedule. So if I were to go to my member database and pull up my list of my fake people, you're going to have the ability to either go into profiles and make these changes, or you can do this in mass too. So for those of you that haven't looked in the profiles in a minute, if we pull up our fake friend Carlos here, as you scroll down through the profile, this is what it's referring to. So your staff is qualified for a combination of schedules and positions. And that's not only allowing where you can put them on a schedule, but it's going to impact what they can sign up for and who they can trade shifts with. So those qualifications play a really big role throughout the system. And it's as easy as clicking and making adjustments to whatever people should have or not have. And these do lock out at your member level. So if you don't have authority to touch these, you will actually just see a bunch of green check marks next to the items that they're allowed to work. So for the sake of the easy example today, we're going to use batch editing back here to make adjustments to schedule positions and position permissions. And in this case, it could be selecting a handful of people, or maybe we needed to sort by a work group or a title and group people a little differently. Or you can mass select. So in our fake database, we're going to do the fast way. We're just going to give it to everybody for now. And as we click that batch edit function, we're going to be able to give these folks the ability to work on the admin schedule. And then we can give them access to work the different positions we added. So it could be one person, could be a large group of people. Either way, you're going to have the ability to make that edit from here. So now that those folks are qualified, if I go back to my hourly editor and do a quick little refresh, now we're seeing a list of members in the member availability section. And in a real life situation, you're going to have lists that vary depending upon people's qualifications for whatever role you're picking. And from here, you would be open to, do things like a drag and a drop to the schedule. Or you can use maybe availability, where your staff is going in and providing hours that they're available to work as a reference to do those sorts of manual adjustments. Or if we wanted to use repeats and rotations, you can actually add people in that pattern-based breakdown. So if we pick on our friend Carlos here, we can add him to the admin schedule. And let's make him the chief. He's going to work 8 to 1700. Back it up to the first of the month. And he's going to work every day of the week except Saturday and Sunday. And this schedule doesn't really change. So I'm going to let this go out for a max of 2 years. But if you have rotating position patterns that every quarter something's going to change, or maybe you do bids, you could certainly change this date range to end when your next bid is set to occur. So you've got a clean slate when you need to enter for the next bid period. And as we go ahead and run that repeat and rotation, the screen is going to adjust, and we are now going to see that Carlos Baker has been added to this schedule Monday through Friday every single week. Now, in the event of, let's say, in this exact case, we have a schedule where it's not staffed on the weekends. We don't want to see it. I don't want to know that it's there because we don't use it on the weekend. This is going to be another opportunity to use that block time to your benefit. So for example, if we were to go to repeats and rotations, pull up our good friend block time, and then let's go find that admin schedule. And we want this to apply to all positions. So we're dealing within the range of shift time right now, but we want this to not just apply to a chief or the assistant chief. We want it to be everything on this schedule. So we're going to go ahead and click all positions. And then we're going to tell the system, just block this thing off on the weekend. We're just going to put in the time frame. We're going to tell the system, do this every Saturday and Sunday. And then the range that should be done for. And as we hit continue, that page is going to update, and you're no longer going to see that admin schedule on the weekends. So block time really is your best friend as far as making changes to that stuff. And it is perfectly acceptable to create a schedule that's wide open with no block time, enter all your rotations, and then block over it. That's something that is someone who builds systems for customers. I do on the regular basis. I always tell people it's the add a blanket of block time. Just throw it over top of everything 24 hours a day, and block time will never override a person. So it would just fall into any openings that are left over that you don't need to see. So
Say,
that's
Kelsey,
something to,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you?
yeah.
You had a great example there of using the block time. One of the questions that I've had and I've answered, but I think it might be helpful to show it, is if they have, for instance, during the week, they do like a 10-hour schedule, say 8 to 6, and then on the
Mhm.
weekends, they do 5-hour shifts. I should say not schedules, but shifts. Could you kind of show them then how, using the block time, how you still leave um, the like 8 to 4 on a, or 5 hours, I think 8 to 1. I didn't look at what his time was, but do a 5-hour time on the weekends versus the 10 hours during the week.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say for the sake of the example, we'll stick with that 8 to 13.
Hmm.
Um, right now we've got the schedule closed down. If we were to go look at the admin schedule and scroll forward to, let's say, a Saturday, it's still there.
Hmm.
It's just completely blocked. So there's a couple of ways to do this, depending upon personal preference. There is a way to do this using repeats and rotations, and there also is functionality called date range delete, that will allow you to mass delete block time. So in this particular case, we could tell the system I'm looking to delete block time on the admin schedule, and I want this to apply to all of the positions. And we're going to ask it to remove the block time from 8 to 1300. And we're only going to do this on Saturdays and Sundays. So don't touch the rest of the week, just those 2 days that are fully blocked off. And if we go ahead and hit continue on this, it's going to pop up a screen that'll show you what it's removing as long as it's under a certain number of records. So we can even do a quick double check and make sure, well, it looks like on the 5th, it's going to pull off 8 to 13 for all 3 positions, and just make sure it looks like it's doing the right thing. And if we're good, we can confirm that change. And then when we go back and look at the schedule, you're going to see 8 to 17 Monday through Friday, and then you're going to see 8 to 13 Saturday and Sunday.
Perfect. And with the understanding that you're not able to in setup in the schedule, you're not able to define the shifts based on the per day.
Sure.
It's the right. It's the entire
Yep,
schedule.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. It that definition in the back end provides the areas like date pickers throughout the system a general reference for what you're doing. It's not necessarily a concrete stop by any means. You can
Mhm.
absolutely leave that for a full 24 hours and do whatever your preference is. So,
Right.
but there is no way to differentiate day to day in the setup space.
Right. So as long as I have your time, I'm going to throw one more at you. Somebody was asking about the shift labels that you have listed here. Could you show them where to define those and how it's kind of defined in the setup?
Yeah, absolutely. So in your backend setup, you're going to find shift labels as an option in the backend option for the setup menu. So as you come in here, if it's not turned on, you'll just click to enable. And basically what you're going to do is lay out a pattern. So you can pick a start date, and let's say, it's a 24:48. You're going to have a shift on a certain day. You're going to have the option to, create and give it a name and pick what color you want. And you're basically going to draw the pattern out till the point where it repeats. So if you're one of my folks that's on like a Pitman or a Panama style rotation, it's going to be 14 labels that'll go out over the course of those 2 weeks, because at 14 weeks that pattern repeats again. If it's a 24:48, it's going to be 3 labels. If it's a 48:96, you kind of get the picture. It's going to rotate around. But adding these items in here will then lay out the pattern for you here. And once that's all entered out, that's when you're going to start to see these shift labels populate on your screen. So this can be pivoted to most repeating patterns. Maybe you have more than one shift that runs the same day. Maybe A shift works days, C shift works nights, and they all move together at the same time. So perhaps that label is A/C shift is on today. So you're going to be able to pivot that a little bit, but one set of labels per day. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you,
Any,
Kelsey.
you bet. Any other answer or any other questions out there, Nance?
Nope, not right now.
Okay, awesome. So kind of pivoting back to that backend setup, I do want to show you guys a couple of different functionalities back here as well and how they really play a role in the system. So for the sake of today, we're going to start out with, let's say we're going to make a special event schedule. This one comes up quite a bit, generic special event, generic training event. You can create schedules that it just exist in the background all of the time, and you can use that block time blanket trick to close them off until you need them. So again, kind of creating real estate for yourself so that you've got a place for those items to define. But for the sake of today and for this example, we're just going to, let's throw just a couple EMTs on here so you can see how this works. Let's say for the sake of this example, we're going to go with that 8 a.m. start time again, but we want this to display as 2 shifts, 8 to 20 and 20 to 08. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to pull this up in the calendar view so you can see what happened. And what you're going to note here is that you start to see 08 to 20 and 20 to 08 as an option on the schedule. It's essentially creating those into separate shifts. So this is a really great way. Let's say, for example, you're an EMS service and you allow your staff to sign up for shorter chunks for the day. That's really how you manage your schedule, is through signups and availability. This would give you kind of that minimum time frame. You know, if you guys are going to sign up, it has to be a 4-hour increment or it has to be X number of hours. This split can kind of help that out and give them predefined ways to sign up for that schedule. Now, if we make a, let's go, we're going to go here. We're going to make a quick mass edit here. We're going to give qualifications to this schedule. Make sure people can work on it. I'm going to give a little refresh. Now, also from the point of view of an employee, this makes a difference in how these things display. So let's say, for example, I am an employee and I'm coming in to sign up for a shift. If I am qualified to work that special event schedule, you are going to see those display as 8 to 20, 20 to 8 across those multiple shift lines. You'll see over here today, it's changing that time frame because of where we're at in the day so far. If we were to make a pivot in this system and change this to a single 24-hour range of time, it's going to impact how that displays on your schedule. And sometimes there's a use case for this, especially if you want to reduce lines on your schedule. So if we were to refresh the screen and look at this again, you're going to note that instead of 8 lines here, you're now seeing 4 for 24 hours. And if I were to emulate an employee here and try to sign up for one of these shifts, it's going to default that time frame. So it's going to pick 8 to 8. If this was that split, it would pick 8 to 17 or 8 to 20, whatever they picked on. Not to say that they can't change that and sign up for a partial if you allow it, but that's a consideration to think about as you lay out your schedule and decide what's ultimately going to look best for your actual schedule views. The other item to note back here is we can obviously save schedules, we can grant access to schedules, but you can actually clone schedules back here. And that's got some added functionality to it. So for example, if we were looking at this ALS truck, run 7 to 19, 19 to 7, 2 shifts, we got a medic and an EMT. If you were gonna say, add another ALS truck, you can clone this. Let me do a little refresh. I think I made too many changes on too many windows. Let me just make sure that I get in there okay. All right, so if I go ahead and clone that schedule, you're gonna see an exact replica of that schedule populate as clone of ALS truck. So you can go through and you can adjust the naming convention. Maybe this is ALS truck 2, but it pulled your schedule start time, it put the same positions, it puts your same shift number, it's got the same splits. But this right here is what you want to pay attention to, and this can be a real time saver if it's appropriate. And that is when you clone a schedule, it not only duplicates the schedule foundation that we've built back here, but it also updates schedule permissions in the member database and scheduling authority within an access level. So when we talk about those work qualifications, this is saying that if someone was qualified to work on ALS truck, it automatically updated them to be qualified to work on ALS truck 2. And if you had an access level, let's say your supervisory staff had scheduling authority over ALS truck, when you clone that schedule, it will give them access to ALS truck 2 as well. So you can start from scratch, which is going to have none of that information associated with it. And then you can set that up individually, or you can certainly go through and clone, and those items are going to replicate for you. Which is also another good point here. When you do create new schedules from scratch, you will want to update and make sure people have scheduling authority over that schedule. So if you created a special event schedule that your schedulers now need access to, you're going to want to make sure that that access level gets updated to permit them to make changes to that schedule. The last thing that I wanted to kind of note here today is what happens when we update and move positions. So in the example, let's say we wanted to change the naming convention of medic/EMT. And maybe we just want it to be EMT or higher. Maybe there's just a bare minimum requirement for this, and then anybody who's qualified higher can also backfill. You can always come through the positions tab, and you will have the ability to click and change this to adjust the naming convention. So this could be EMT or higher. Give ourselves a little bit more leniency for that spot. So we can update that, and it's going to update now on the schedules as well. The word of caution that kind of goes with this is if you need a new position and something that's in this list already is no longer needed, always make a new position before you repurpose something for something totally unrelated. So for the sake of the example, let's say we have a chief spot and we have one person that's qualified for that chief, and you go through and change this position name to something totally unrelated. The system is not going to know what to do with that change in qualification because you've already qualified people for that position. So you're going to get a pop-up and you're going to get an error. So we always just say, make sure that you're not reusing things for something totally unrelated, as there's qualifications that are already associated with that item. If something is no longer needed, once the schedule is archived that this is a part of, you do have the option to go ahead and clean that up at that point, but not while it's in use. That's why we're seeing these little trash can red icons, is because those are currently being utilized. So we can't delete those while they're in use. As far as, adding people to those schedules, we kind of talked about the manual drag and drop. We talked about repeats and rotations. There's lots of different complicated things that can come with repeats and rotations as far as how you get those things to work. So if you do work in some kind of repeating pattern, you are going to have the ability to use repeats and rotations to accommodate lots of different types of rotations. Whether it's something like our admin schedule where it was Monday through Friday, or maybe you work a 2-week pattern where you do like let's do that Pittman style rotation where you work every other weekend. You can lay these things out and run pattern-based schedules that way in multiples of longer weeks or even custom. So maybe it's a 4896 where you work 48 hours in a row and 96 hours off. You're going to have lots of flexible options down here to pick some preset options or lay out your own. The Aladtec staff can even write custom ones for you. So if there's something really complex that needs to come up, we have some additional options available through the support team. And you can do alternating schedules. So if we have a department where you flip from your day schedule to your night schedule every 4 weeks, you can actually have people rotate between schedules. I know alternating schedules is something we get questions about quite a bit. But let's say, for example, every 4 weeks, you're going to go from one schedule to another schedule in a different position. You can actually go ahead and kind of plan that out and build your repeating rotation for whatever that is, and actually drop people onto schedules differently if need be.
So Kelsey, if this is a good time, I've got a couple more questions for you.
Sure, perfect.
Okay, so the one is holidays. Can you just touch briefly on how the holidays work?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways, depending upon the needs of the department specifically. So a lot of our customers kind of take one of two routes. You may have a time off type for holiday. Let's say, for example, everybody at your department gets paid on the holiday, whether they're working or not, and you need some way to account for those people that aren't working but need to get paid. Something like a holiday time off type or a holiday not working schedule would give you some real estate and a way to record some of that time. If you do have our payroll module, that does provide some additional functionality as well. So you can go through and do things like enable holidays, where you can define your specific department holidays. And then as part of the setup of your payroll module, you can actually include marking of holiday hours to be included in that. So kind of references back to this point as well. So a couple of different ways to approach that depending upon what the needs of the department are.
Perfect. Another question is if you could just touch briefly on the with like repeats and rotations and people that want to use like lunch hour.
Sure. So it depends on, again, Aladtec, kind of the name of the game here is there's lots of flexibility. It really depends on how you guys need to handle those. So if there's always two questions I ask people when lunches come up, and that is, do you have to see the lunch on the schedule? Do you always know that these people are going to be on lunch from noon to 1? Or do you need to have the flexibility to appropriately track specific times that that person went to lunch? In the latter case, obviously something like a time clock is going to give you real flexibility about when people go to lunch. They're going to clock in, clock out. At that point, you would schedule them for their 9-hour shift and they would only be clocked in for 8. I have worked with departments where they do not utilize a time clock. And depending on the route they want to go, it's either a matter of scheduling repeats and rotations in 2 chunks. So there's a day part of your shift and a night part of your shift. So in our 8 to 17 breakdown, you may have someone who has a rotation that looks something like this. Let's pick on our friend Vicky here. And let's pick on that admin schedule. So let's say Vicky's our admin assistant. She's going to work 8 to noon, Monday through Friday. And we are going to must have had something in the way. Let's try this again. Let's do special event. We'll just do it this way. So let's do 8 to noon. Oh, I must have vacation leave plugged in somewhere. We're just going to move past it. So in this case, we ran a rotation for 8 to noon, and then we can run a second rotation from 1 to 1700, essentially leaving a gap in the middle of the day for that hour or that half-hour lunch, whatever that'll look like. So that person will appear to be on that schedule in 2 chunks of time. So essentially we're bypassing that lunch hour and reducing that time on the schedule. So if we were to go look at Vicky now, let's turn off some of the noise here. When you look at that special event schedule, you will see chunks of time that she's scheduled for instead of that whole chunk of time. The other option that I have seen some departments utilize, depending upon how they want to handle things, if they don't want to pre-schedule lunches and they want exact time frames, I have seen some people elect to use a time off type or a time type, depending upon how they go about reporting that back, where you may have a lunch break time off type, where they basically enter time off for the hour that they were at lunch. So that is then deducted from the schedule. You can pull that off from something like a payroll module from a paid type of leave as well. Okay.
Perfect. That's all I have for questions right now. We had a lot of great questions. I've been busy answering questions left and right, and threw a few at you there that I thought were good and helpful to show people, but I appreciate all the questions too. Anything else you have, Kelsey?
I don't think so. I think that kind of covers it. I appreciate
Okay.
all the feedback and lots of good questions today.
Perfect. Yeah, it was a good topic. A lot of helpful information. So, and there's a lot of information. So if you have more questions, feel free to contact support and they can walk you through all the different scenarios and stuff that was kind of talked about and questioned. So we want to make sure that we get those answered for you. So I hope you can join us next time. We're going to be talking about accruals. It's kind of probably a good time of year because sometimes with the beginning of the new year, you need to reset something, or maybe you want to start using accruals, that kind of stuff. So we're going to be going through all the different ways of setting up accruals and using them throughout the system. So I think that wraps it up for us today. We ran a little bit over. I appreciate you guys listening in, and I hope it was very helpful. Everybody have a great rest of your day.